What is going on, y'all? KM Best here. We're going to have a Magic World Champion rating Pokemon Pocket cards. He did not know the game existed before today. Let's see if knowledge is transferable across games. I am joined by Brian Braun-Duin, 2016 Magic the Gathering World Champion, a guy who has been on a lot of videos like this on my Marvel Snap channel, but this is the first time I've tried to do a video like this for Pokemon Pocket. And Pokemon Pocket is sort of a hyper-specialized game. I don't think it's like farther from a game like Magic than Marvel Snap, but it definitely sort of, it's more, I guess, vertical is how I would say it. But Brian, would you care to introduce yourself to the people?
Yeah, sure. I'm Brian. I was a longtime Magic professional, not anymore. I ended up winning the 2016 Magic World Championships, and had a fairly successful career throughout.
So let's start with what the game is. I asked Brian what he knew about Pokemon TCG Pocket, and he said, I know Pikachu, and that is where we're going to start. So I figured the best place to start is by explaining how the game works, and I think the easiest way to do that is by looking at a card. Pokemon has multiple types of cards. There are, of course, Pokemon, and then there are also items, and then there are also trainers. We're going to start with Pokemon, right? That's sort of, for the record, that's a little bit like, creatures, instant sorceries, if I were to draw the analogy to Magic here. Pokemon also has energy. Energy in Pokemon TCG Pocket is a little bit like Hearthstone mana, where in the traditional card game, it is like normal mana, right? You see Bulbasaur here. You might think that that energy in the corner has something to do with what it takes to play him. It doesn't. The energy is actually used entirely to pay for attacks. So you get one energy a turn. Bulbasaur needs a grass and a colorless to attack for 40. That's how the card works here. Now, what actually lets you play cards is in the top left corner. You see the basic there? A basic Pokemon can just be played. A stage 1 Pokemon has to be evolved into. And that's sort of how you get to cards. But when you evolve, you keep the energy on the Pokemon. So remember, one energy a turn, but it stays with the Pokemon that you are evolving into. So for example, you had 2 energy on Bulbasaur. You evolve it, you put another energy on it. That is the 3 energy needed to use Razor Leaf on Ivysaur. 90 HP, attacks for 60, can only be played basically on top of a Bulbasaur that you have. The thing that Pokemon Pocket does is give you 1 active Pokemon and 3 slots on your bench. Now, the way this works is that you can evolve stuff anywhere. You can attach energy to anywhere. So there are some dynamics like stalling that can be like, all right, I'm going to build up my Ivysaur on the bench, turn it into a Venusaur, and I'm just going to have a guy be out there to soak damage in the meantime while I evolve into my big guy. Speaking of the big guy, it's probably time to talk a little bit about EX Pokemon and how you actually win the game. The game is won by getting 3 prize points. Each Pokemon you knock out is worth 1 prize point. EX Pokemon are worth 2 prize points, and they typically make up for this by having bigger and better attacks and stats than their typical counterparts. For example, we could see that Venusaur EX is significantly stronger than normal Venusaur, but if Venusaur EX ever goes down, you're giving up 2 of the 3 prize points that will let your opponent win the game. That's the basic underlying dynamic of Pokemon TCG Pocket. Do you have any questions on top of what we just talked about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So explain it. I'm a little confused about the energy system. So you
Sure.
get one. Is it cumulative energy? So you get 1 energy the first turn, 2 energy the second turn, or is it just 1 per turn period?
You get 1 per turn, but it's not like using the attack makes it go away.
Oh, okay.
So you don't use all for Mega Drain. You just get 2 for energy, and you can keep doing that attack. Basically, you are repeatedly able to launch that attack, but getting to that energy, and by the reverse token of that, a lot of what Pokemon Pocket games tend to be about are taking out the stuff that your opponent has invested energy into, because that's effectively setting them back massively because that energy is such an investment.
So you invest energy you get one energy a turn, you invest it onto a card then
Yes.
effectively. And then once you have enough energy to use abilities, you can use those abilities every turn
Yeah.
once you've read. Now, I'm noticing that the energy on this card is two different types. How does that work?
That is colorless.
Okay.
It's just, yeah, it's colorless energy. So 2 green and 2 of any other type. That's 2 GG is how you would read that in Magic terms.
Okay. So there are different types of do you have to have like cards that are the same type of energy in your
Yes.
deck or okay.
The way it works with the auto-generated energy is you can choose what type of energy you want to generate when you make the deck. This means that almost overwhelmingly decks are monotype. There are very few cards that try to jump outside of that monotype. It can happen, but overwhelmingly things are like a fire deck, a fighting deck, and there are like some splashable cards that maybe you're not even including the energy to run certain attacks with. There are a couple cards that probably will come up in this video where they are commonly splashed, but they're not commonly used to actually do anything other than like sit there. And there are also colorless cards that are, those are artifacts, right? Typically, you are monotype in this game most of the time, at least in the current state of the metagame. I'll tell you that much.
So now I guess my next question is like this Venusaur has 160 HP,
Yes.
presumably, right? So it would die to 2 Mega Drains from an opposing Venusaur, if
Sure.
I'm not. And damage is cumulative, right? Like it just stays
Correct.
on.
It's
Okay.
Hearthstone damage, yeah. And then there is one more important dynamic to talk about. You see those numbers at the bottom here? The weakness and the retreat cost? The
Yeah.
way Pokemon Pocket works, you have one active Pokemon. You put that Pokemon out there. In order to switch it with something from your bench, it either has to die or you have to pay that retreat cost, which means that is actually your energy going away. If you have 4 energy on Venusaur and you have to retreat it, 3 energy disappears. It's gone. And so retreating is a costly endeavor with bigger Pokemon, and a low retreat cost is very valuable because of how it allows you to get in and out and not actually give up the prizes while doing damage.
Okay. So now I still have another question about the energy. So you put energy on your Pokemon. Can you put energy on Pokemon that are sitting on your bench?
Yes,
Or
you
does it have
can.
to you can, okay. So every turn you get 1 energy and you can choose one of your 4 Pokemon to like invest that energy into,
Yeah,
basically.
you don't always have a full bench and an active Pokemon, but yeah, you can put the energy wherever you want it.
Okay. And now I guess my last question is, all right, so what are the opening hand sizes and like how many cards are you drawing a turn? So
Uh,
forth like
you start with 5 cards in hand, and you draw 1 card a turn. The way that Pokemon TCG Pocket works, you are always guaranteed to have a basic in your opening hand, meaning a basic Pokemon. So you're never going to be put in a situation where you do not have anything to put on the board. One note is that if you lose your only Pokemon, you are going to immediately lose the game. They don't need to get 3 prize points at all. If you don't have any Pokemon, you can't play the game. So they compensated for that with the algorithm here. 20 card decks. There is a 1 card per turn draw, and of course, if you are going first, you do not get energy. The main restriction is that you cannot evolve stuff on the same turn you play it. If you play Bulbasaur, that's turn 1. The next time it's your turn, you can evolve it into Ivysaur. The next time it's your turn, you can evolve it into Venusaur. You can't do all of those at the same time. So going first, going second, it's typically regarded as better to go second because the energy is so important, but there are advantages to going first, like being able to evolve before your opponent can. Other than that, there are very few restrictions on the kind of cards you're allowed to play. It's just, do you have space to play this card? Can you evolve into this card? Items can be played in an unlimited way. Trainers, you're only allowed to use 1 of per turn. I'm about to show you an example of both of those. There are 2 types of trainer cards. Earlier, I referred to them as item and trainer. It's technically item and supporter, and they're both trainer cards, which is weird because all of the supporters are named after trainers. It's not worth getting into. I don't like how they translated that. It bothers the crap out of me. However, this is an item. You can play any number of item cards during your turn. They all have effects like this. They just do a thing and you can put it in your deck and do whatever. This one is basically Peak. You can just play Peak. It is a card you can play. There is no cost associated with it other than that you put it in your deck.
Now, when you play one of these cards, do you get this effect continue like for the rest of the game, or is
No,
it just just when
it's
you play?
just Peak.
Okay, and it does. This isn't like one of your slots on the board or anything like that
No,
either, right?
there's genuinely no cost associated to it. You could just, there's just a bunch of stuff that you could just like, if I want that in my deck, I can have it. This is a supporter card, aka what I refer to as trainers incorrectly. This one is the kind of card that you can only play one of per turn. So there are multiple cards that are supporters that are on a relatively higher power level, as you can see, than a lot of the items, because you can only play one of them per turn. You can still put two of them in your deck. There's a 2 card per deck limit here, but you are only allowed to play one of these like Professor Oaks per turn, right? There's plenty of other supporters. There's like Giovanni and Misty and Brock and Blaine. All these people, if you've ever played the Pokemon games, you probably recognize the names. You can only do one of that subtype of cards per turn. So if you played the Professor Oak, you cannot play the Blaine, for example, the same turn. You have to wait till the next turn. Do you have any further questions?
I mean, I think at the moment, no. Maybe
All right.
when I see some cards
All
that
right.
do things I'm not expecting, I might.
That was a long ass intro segment. I'm really kind of wondering where this is gonna go now, because like there's so much more about this game to explain that I'm only realizing now, because like I've done this with Marvel Snap and it's just like the bigger number wins, cards do things, and like this there's like multiple types of cards, they have different rules, there's evolutions, there's verticality. There's actually kind of a shocking amount of complexity here.
When you say verticality, I assume you mean like evolution.
That is what I mean.
Pokemon. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. That makes sense. I can. Yeah.
It's a weird concept to me, because I haven't played other card games that are built like that, where it's like having a bigger Pokemon is a card disadvantage engine a little bit some of the time. Fascinating stuff going on.
You know what I immediately thought about is, sorry to interject, but I'm sure you're familiar with the game Scrabble. There's like a version of Scrabble called Upwords, where you can like
you
can make words vertically as well as.
That's sick. Yeah.
When you said verticality, that's like immediately what I thought about.
Yeah, no, it's like the actual 3D chess, the 4D chess. That's what's happening.
Exactly.
It's nice. This is Porygon. Basic Pokemon, colorless, 50 HP. It has a Pokemon ability that does exactly what it says. You can look at the top card of your deck once per turn. It also has a 1 energy attack, Sharpen, that does 20 damage. This is your first test. What do you think this card is on a scale of whatever scale you want to use? You can do thumbs up, thumbs down. You can do 1 to 10, however you want to do it.
Oh man. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to use one of the things that you said earlier.
Sure.
Which is that having a low retreat cost is good.
It is.
So I'm going to assume that this one having a very low retreat cost is a benefit for this card.
It is.
Once during your turn, you may look at the top card of your deck. I think there is. My guess is that is an ability that has some value. Like maybe you have a way to draw cards or something like that, but probably doesn't have an immense amount of value. And then its damage ability doesn't look that imposing to me. So to me, this looks like a card that on the surface is a weak card. However, I'm going to guess that there's going to be some kind of strategies that value this as just a like cheap utility card that can help you progress to bigger stuff later in the game.
No, your surface level read was right here. This guy sucks. He's never used for anything. The hard thing about doing rate the cards for Pokemon Pocket is that sometimes you'll get like a basic and you'll be like, well, if this evolves into something good, maybe it's not terrible. It doesn't. And so it is terrible. And so this is just not a reasonable card to be playing here. Like if you want, like there are like some occasionally decent colorless utility guys. This is not one of them. Like, this is not a card that you're going to be like, oh, you know, I could use the ability to look at the top cards in my deck. No, Well, I don't want the ability to look at the top cards in my deck. I want something probably better than that if I'm going to be like a little splashy boy with it.
Gotcha.
This is Drudagon. It has an ability that deals 20 damage to everything that attacks it. It has a very weirdly costed energy attack where it's like it needs fire, water, and colorless. That is a genuine awkward bit of this card, but it also is a dragon type, and that means it has no actual weaknesses. It has a 2 retreat cost, 100 HP, and it is a basic Pokemon.
I'm gonna guess that. Okay. I'm gonna guess that this card is good. Because it has what looks like a pretty high level of HP for a basic Pokemon based on like the 2 cards I've seen so far.
You have seen 2
And
cards.
and it I think the ability to dish damage back on getting attacked is probably pretty good too. I imagine like like that previous Pokemon we saw like can't actually kill this card, right? Because
Correct.
it would take more damage than it would take equal amount of damage as it deals out. So I imagine that this card is pretty good, and maybe you like maybe you don't even care that much about being able to use the Dragon Claw ability. It's just something that you want to play as having a lot of HP and being really annoying to take out.
100% nailed it. That is exactly what this card is. Nobody has ever attacked with Dragon Claw. It's not a real thing. Nobody does it. This guy sits in the front line and says, "You don't have to invest anything in me. I'll do some damage. I'll soak some attacks. You can spend all your energy building up whatever backline monster you want to build up." He is the tank guy in this game right now because of his basicness, basically. This is a card you put in the starting spot on turn 1. He is your active Pokemon. Everything else happens on the back line. Your opponent can't interact with the back line very easily. By the time they get through him, you have something big and mean to hit them with because they're investing stuff in getting through him, and you're investing stuff only in the big and mean guy to hit people with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just
Snorlax, basic Pokemon, 4 retreat cost, attacks for 70 with a 4 cost rollout, but 150 HP is a basic.
all right. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that this card is bad. My reason for guessing is that even though it has a lot of HP, you have to invest a significant amount into this card to get it to do anything. And what it does once you've invested that much into it doesn't look that impressive to me. So I'm going to guess that even though this has a lot of HP and maybe looks like it's impressive because of its HP, because it doesn't do anything, this card actually sucks.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. This is just bad Drudagon. That's exactly what this is. This is Drudagon, but worse, because at least Drudagon can leave the battlefield. It's a 2 retreat cost. 4 retreat cost, giving up 4 energy is psychotic. And investing into this is guaranteeing that you're going to give up a bunch of energy anyway, because there's going to be stuff that can get through it by the time you build it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. This looks like a free like victory point for your opponent kind of card.
A little bit, yeah. I hope this one's legible. This is Meowth, 60 HP, 1 colorless energy to attack, 10 damage, draw a card.
So the energy abilities like that on Pokemon, can those be played on the back line or only when they're your active Pokemon?
It's an attack.
Okay.
Abilities like Porygons can happen on the back line. This is an attack, only when it's active. So in order to start drawing the cards, you do have to expose yourself to, hey, that's a 60 HP Pokemon that could get knocked out very easily.
Okay. I'm gonna guess that despite its low HP, that might cause this card to die fairly quickly. That this card is actually very good because typically drawing a card is really really good, especially in a game like this where things don't really cost anything to play. So I'm gonna guess that, and it's very cheap to invest into it because it's just one cost to be able to do that. So I'm gonna guess that this card is really good because it lets you generate a lot of extra cards.
It's definitely not really good. I put this on here to sort of contrast with Porygon, where, like, if you did want that kind of thing, a utility guy in colorless, Meowth would be a better option. Like, it would be better than Porygon. That is, like, a better thing. But it's definitely not really good, in part because there are other options to draw cards that are, like, on trainer cards, like items and supporters, and so you don't actually have to risk victory points given up in order to draw cards some of the time in this game. So that is part of what makes it happen. But the other part of what makes it happen is, like, one energy actually matters a whole lot, right? We talked about going first and going second. Like, these games happen quickly. And it's important enough to have energy to, like, start getting your big attacks happening sooner. Like, that's what tempo is in Pokemon Pocket, is whoever can start bringing their big beaters to hit for a bunch sooner, that matters. So if you draw that card, that's cool. But if they immediately knock it out, you've drawn one card and they got that energy away from you, and I think they take that trade a lot of the time.
So it's like casting Preordain when your opponent's attacking you with Ragavan.
Yeah. It's worse than Preordain though. It's like
casting like draw a card for blue or something.
Sure. Like... Yeah. Like Preordain's like a really it's a little high for Meowth, I think.
So that I had a question about that.
Sure.
Now I had like it was in my head. Now I'm blanking on it.
I have the power of editing. I could leave this in, or I can cut it out. You can take your time.
Yeah, feel free to. Let me see. Like what was it that I wanted to? I honestly cannot remember. Let's just we'll move on. If I think of it again, I will.
I really want to leave that in, but I probably have to cut it out. This is Mewtwo EX, 150 HP, and has 2 attacks, unlike many other Pokemon. The first one does 50 for a Psychic and a Colorless. The second one does 150 for 2 Psychic and 2 Colorless, but requires you to discard 2 energy when you use it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I have no conceptual understanding of, like, so far, I guess. Oh, so this is also a basic. This is a basic, but it's an EX. Okay, I see.
That will come up. Basic EXs tend to be, I guess I would say they run the gamut from, like, really, really good to really, really not good. Like that, because of the way in which that works.
Right. Interesting. So this one is as big as the Snorlax. The abilities look a lot better. The retreat cost is a lot lower.
Mm-hmm.
But it does give up 2 points if it gets taken out. So yeah, I'm gonna guess that it's not that good. I'm gonna guess that I don't know, that it doesn't. Oh man, now I'm changing my mind on it. This is actually really tough. I'm kind of lost in this one, but I'm gonna guess that it's not that good because just the value doesn't meet the amount, like the value that you get from this card isn't met by the fact that you lose 2 victory points if it's taken out.
This card's a monster. This card is like the card in this game. And a lot of it is because, have you seen a single Pokemon that lives through that 150?
I have not.
Yeah, like that's the premise, right? So like, because there are a bunch of Pokemon EXs running around, right? The value prop of this card is you don't have to evolve into it, and 150 gets you 2 victory points a lot of the time. Because if you knock out your opponent's EX Pokemon that has like 120, 130, 140, suddenly the game is just extremely out of reach. This guy is, because he is basic and hits that high, that is like what his value prop is effectively. He also has some really unique and notable support in the psychic type, where there are things that can attach energy to him, which really alleviates the downside of that side drive attack. But I don't know. I would say he's probably going to end up being good just on being a basic that is this strong, is sort of how I would phrase it. Like, having the ability to be this monstrous, this big, without having to, like, search through your deck to evolve to a stage 2 the way other Pokemon will have to. Like, you saw the Venusaur earlier. Venusaur is arguably a better Pokemon, but you have to evolve. You have to have Bulbasaur and Ivysaur and Venusaur, and they have to not die. All of that stuff has to happen. You can just play a Mewtwo, and it's there. And that's a really big advantage.
You know, I guess I should have known because it's Mewtwo. Isn't that like the the big deal in Pokemon world? Yeah.
He is a big deal in Pokemon world, but they haven't done like the great, like, I think they've done a pretty good job at making most big deals good enough cards to play. But like, Mewtwo is like, there have been 2 decks that have consistently been elite in Pokemon TCG Pocket throughout the expansions we've had. He is one of them.
Okay.
He has never been bad, ever.
Well, I think he's bad. Boom. Got him.
Got his ass, yeah. A different style of EX here. Moltres EX. Again, a basic EX, but not the same kind of basic EX as Mewtwo. This one is more of a support type card. The first attack flips 3 coins and adds energy equal to the number of heads to your fire Pokemon on the bench. You obviously do get to pick where that energy ends up going. That costs 1 fire energy. It also can attack for 70 with 1 fire energy and 2 colorless. A 2 retreat cost and a 140 HP round out this package.
Okay, so when it says energy from your energy zone,
that doesn't actually mean anything. It just means yeah,
you get that much energy, basically.
Yes, I don't know why they've insisted on wording it as your energy zone. It has no bearing on anything.
Okay. Attach it to your benched Pokemon in any way you like. Interesting.
Benched fire Pokemon. That fire, okay. it can't just attach to whatever. Card would be completely insane if it could just be in whatever and attach to whatever.
Yeah. So, okay. So, the Heat Blast ability is probably kind of just a thing that's there. I mean, I would maybe sometimes you use it when you have no value to get out of Inferno Dance or something. But my guess is that you would invest 1 energy into this card so that you can get Inferno Dance going, and you're hoping that the amount of extra energy you're generating from that ability makes up for makes up for the fact that you're not like actively, maybe out there dealing damage to your opponent's Pokemon, and that this generates 2 points upon being what is knocked out. That's the word. Okay.
Yeah, when it dies, basically.
Yeah.
That because it is an EX, that is sort of what this Pokemon is built around, right? Like, it's an EX that isn't like the other EXs. There are very few like sort of explicit support EXs. There are plenty of support Pokemon. They do not show up in EX very commonly. A lot of EXs are just like, here's the boss monster. This one is very different.
Okay. So this looks like almost like a combo type card to me, where it's like you use this to like do some crazy thing on some other Pokemon. Like, I don't know what other Pokemon there are out there that you can have on your bench that like benefit from obscene amounts of energy. I'm sure there's probably some out there. Now, I guess here's a question about.
Sure.
So you always start with a basic Pokemon in your opening hand, is that correct?
That is correct. At least. Like, the algorithm is such that is your min roll. Obviously, if you draw more than 1 basic, it doesn't have to put 1 in your hand.
Okay. this might be too cheaty of a question. How often are decks comprised of just one basic, so you always have that?
That's a very astute question. There are
Okay.
decks that are 18 trainers and then just the 2 basic EXs that you'd play there. The problem is you can't do that with Moltres because it needs to put energy on something else. But that is a very astute question. There have been decks that are built to abuse that. That is absolutely a thing. The typical amount of basics run in a deck is usually 5. That seems to be about the number that tends to get run. You have like maybe you have like 1 evolution line and then 1 supportive thing is typically how it ends up happening. Like for the Mewtwo deck, you typically have Mewtwo as 2 of your basics, and then you have an evolution line of supporter Pokemon, so 2 more basics there, and then you have maybe like a 1 of Splash that's like there to tank or whatever. That's typically how it tends to look when you're building a deck.
All right, I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna guess that this is not a good card. I'll give my reasoning why. You could tell me afterwards how idiotic I am. My guess is that for this card to be effective, you have to have it early on, and you have to have things that benefit from it also to go with it. So that's a lot to ask in terms of like the types of cards that you've assembled over that course of the game. Like I imagine if you find this card later, um, it doesn't have the same effect because the game has already gone on so long. Whereas like this feels like a way to ramp energy early on. So yeah, I'm gonna guess that because it's such a situational thing, it's not that good.
Okay, I'm realizing that I have deprived you of valuable context here. And it's
Okay.
not valuable context in the sense of like an actual game rule, but it's more just like I should have shown you a couple cards before I showed you this card so that you would
Okay.
understand what's going on here. Because this card is busted. I'm going to show you 2 cards and then you're going to understand why I'm saying that. I'm just going to give you these for free. We're not even going to talk about them.
Okay.
Every deck runs 2 of these. They literally just draw 2 cards. You play them for free. Every single deck runs 2 of these.
Okay.
Every single deck runs 2 of these. They just get a basic Pokemon and put it into your hand. They all run 2 of these. So of the 20 cards in your deck, 4 of them are almost always those. And that is the kind of thing that, like, yeah, you're right. You draw Moltres late, it sucks. But the nut draw on that card is so completely bonkers. That is one of, like, the 5 best cards in the game because you can just actually double up your opponent on energy. You can get your stuff out there incredibly. And I'll give you this one for free as well. You said you basically like sort of logicked out the existence of a card like this, so I'll just show it to you. You mentioned some ridiculous big guy to do with Moltres. This is the big guy. This is the big guy you do with Moltres. He does 200 damage. Kills everything in the game.
That's pretty good.
And so like you effectively logicked out the existence of this card in your Moltres. Like you correctly assumed there had to be something like this, and this is that thing. But I feel like without showing you Pokeball and Professor's Research, I did show you Professor's Research earlier, but it's like those are in everything, and you are running a 20 card deck. It happens a lot, and opening on Moltres is so good.
So how many so you can play 2 copies of can you play 2 copies of Moltres, or is
Yeah.
it just okay, you can. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so you have 2 copies of Moltres, you have 2 copies of Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard. For various metagame reasons, Charizard goes in and out of the metagame. It tends to be fairly polarized in certain matchups. It is like the biggest boss monster in the game, but being stage 2, like compare this to Mewtwo, right? Mewtwo just happens more often, basically, where Charizard is like, if you get it right, it'll beat everything, but depending on like how fast the metagame is, it can be very awkward to try to be a Charizard deck. Moltres is the reason you can even build the deck. Moltres is the best card in the deck by a bunch. It is absolutely bonkers. The only card you want to see, you just want your openers to have Moltres something else. That's it.
Okay, so yeah, so it's pretty easy to actually find cards. Then it's pretty easy to find cards, and it's pretty easy to like. You're not going to be like dry. You're not going to have many hands where Moltres is like your only thing going on.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Gengar EX. It's a stage 2. It evolves from Ghastly into Haunter. 170 HP. A 3 psychic, 100 damage spooky shot, and its ability Shadowy Spellbind. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent cannot play any supporter cards from their hand. So we saw Professor's Research earlier. That is probably the strongest supporter card, but there are a lot of very reasonable ones, and so I will give you that that ability is actually a good ability.
Okay. So the supporter cards, you can put, how many of those can you put in your deck? You can put any
As many
amount
as
of
you
them?
want. You can only play one
Okay.
per turn, though.
Right. Okay. And this is a stage. So
2.
stage 2 means you have to have evolved twice. This is the
Yeah,
third, like, okay. So it's basic, then stage 1, then stage 2.
correct.
And as you're evolving, you keep the energy on, right?
You do.
So, okay. Yes. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, this is this is tough to evaluate. Okay, my guess is, oh man, my guess is good. My guess is that this card is not good. Here's my guess: it's that it takes too many turns for you to get this thing into play. By that point in time, your opponent has probably played some amount of the supporter cards in their deck. Um, so the effects, while possibly still good about like any remaining supporter cards they might have, has certainly been muted by the fact that it's taken you until, was it the third turn of the game to get this going. And then outside of that ability, which does look good, but maybe is less good later on, this card doesn't look that powerful to me.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? Like, you play your guy on turn 1, they go on turn 2, you go on turn 3, evolve your guy, they go on turn 4, you go on turn 5, evolve your guy. But, like, just looking at the numbers here, this is a card that attacks for less than Mewtwo EX and takes multiple evolutions to get through to get to the point where it can do that. And that is, I think, ultimately the issue Gengar has, which is just like it gets fairly massively outcompeted. Like I said, most Pokemon EX tend to exist as the boss monster of their deck, right? Like that's what they're doing. That's why they're worth 2 prizes. If this is your boss monster, you're getting got by something that goes bigger sooner.
You're getting hit by 200-point Charizard or
I mean, you're
whatever.
probably not getting hit by 200 points. You might be if they get good on their mole trace rolls, but like there
Yeah.
are like definitely some games where like a lot of these decks have like big nut draws where it's just like everything goes right for them and they're very unbeatable when that happens. With Mewtwo, it's typically like they have the Gardevoir, which is the thing that attaches extra energy to Mewtwo. With Charizard, it's the Moltres, the extra energy on there. There are nut draws where it's just like stuff happens, and it's so Gengar is just like fine. You're never nutting off, and even when you are, it's like, all right, whatever.
Sounds like you're really discounting the spooky shot nut draw.
I am. I.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That phrasing is so bad. The spooky shot nut draw. Like we have 2 synonyms. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I hate it.
I apologize.
Sticking with some EXs, again a little bit of a different EX. This is like a small guy EX. Pikachu EX, 120 HP, lightning type, 2 lightning attack for Circle Circuit, which does 30 damage for each of your benched electric Pokemon.
Okay. And I'm going to kind of assume, but maybe this is a bad assumption based on what I've seen so far, that usually if you're putting Pikachu in your deck, every single Pokemon is electric on your
You
team.
are making a correct assumption. Okay. Actually, the first time I ever saw this card, someone had clearly not read it and played it with a bunch of non-electric types, and they attacked me, and I was like, oh my god! And then it did no damage. So...
Okay, so 30 damage for each of your benched Pokemon. It seems like it's easy to fill your bench, maybe not immediately, but within a couple turns. So by the second turn, my guess is this probably does like between 60 maybe 90 damage if you've got crazy stuff going on. Um, hmm. I'm gonna guess that this card is good because it doesn't cost a lot to invest into. It takes 2 turns to be able to invest into its ability to deal damage. It has a relatively high HP, not like crazy high, but pretty good. And its retreat cost is so low that you can kind of like maybe you could put it out there, machine gun down a couple of things, and then if it's about to die, you can just retreat it back out.
Every single bit of that was correct. That is
Nice.
exactly how the Pikachu EX deck plays. The only thing is that you said it's like 60 to 90. No, this guy just attacks for 90. Like,
Okay.
he just does. And so this is like the aggro deck leader, is basically how I would describe it. Mewtwo EX and Pikachu EX are the decks that have always been good. There are, I think, a uniquely large amount of like good electric types in this game, where like there's a lot of like weird utility in the sort of aggressive electric things. There's a lot of different roles that can be filled in a reasonable way. But the main reason that those roles can be filled is because you need Pokemon on the bench for this guy to 290. Like that's a lot of it, right? And so this guy is like the reason that stuff exists, and we can explore those nuances. Like there's a lot of utility, but it's all predicated on the power of this card, a basic EX that is attacking very fast for a very large amount. And you correctly identified the retreat cost dynamic. The Pikachu EX decks typically are very light on retreat cost, which lets them go in and out and in and out. You have your Pikachu EX attacking, you're building up another Pikachu EX on the bench, they get some damage onto this Pikachu EX, you bring out the one that has full health. It's very hard to deal with.
So this actually brings up another question that I had,
Sure.
which is about how mechanically speaking, how does like the swapping work? So if I retreat this Pokemon,
Yes.
and that means I'm immediately having to place one of my bench Pokemon in the front line, right?
It does.
And then can I do stuff with that bench Pokemon on the same turn?
No, the attack is the last action on every turn.
Okay.
So you're never going to be able to be like attack, retreat, attack, retreat. You have to like, it's modular in that way.
So now the next question I have is, let's say Pikachu attacks an enemy Pokemon and knocks them out.
Yeah.
Does the opponent then immediately choose a Pokemon that goes? They have to do it right then and there.
Yes. Okay. It's again, this is sort of why retreat cost is like a really fun thing. There are also like cards that modify retreat cost. So like, for example, there's a trainer that modifies it -2, a supporter. There's an item that modifies it -1. So there's a lot of like in and out type stuff that can happen with decks like this.
Okay.
Pidgeot EX, 170 HP, full colorless boss monster is sort of this guy's sort of unique role here. He is also Scattering Cyclone, an attack that does more damage for the amount of benched Pokemon your opponent has.
So, okay, so 20 more. So if they have a full bench, it deals 140.
It does.
I'm saying.
Also a 1 retreat cost, which is notable. Like a lot of big EXs tend to have more than 1.
Right. So let's say Pidgeot takes 120 damage and then you retreat him, he's still got that on him, right?
He does. Retreat cost is less useful on guys that are fully invested, if that makes sense. Because it's like, if they can force you to retreat the guy you've invested 3 energy into, you better have something that answers this situation, because otherwise, like, it's better than losing him, but it's still not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I'm going to guess that this card is bad for maybe a very, very stupid reason.
Okay.
So if your opponent has a full bench, it's 140 damage. I feel like a lot of the Pokemon that I've seen have 150 health, and 140 is 10 less than 150. So I'm gonna guess that this thing just does not quite enough damage to be worth it.
Okay, you realize that's insane. That's not exactly why this guy is bad.
Okay.
But you have correctly identified just how much of this game is about breakpointing. It's about you send your big guy in, my big guy one hits your big guy. There's so much of that in this game. And you are correct that he just does a little bit too little in terms of damage right now. 140, not a problem. There are cards that can add damage to make it 150. That's fine. If he was always doing 140, we'd be able to talk. But he's not always doing 140. If this card said Scattering Cyclone 140, well, I think this card would be very good. But it doesn't. So it isn't. And I think that's sort of it's the combination of the conditional and the breakpoint. Like, even in its best case scenario, it needs more. And so that's what makes the card not as good as it otherwise could be.
Yeah, that makes sense. The breakpoint thing makes a lot of sense. Like, Pokemon, like, these damage abilities are doing things in chunks of 10, mostly what I'm seeing, and
they're all 10s, yeah.
Yeah, like if you do 80 damage and your opponent's Pokemon has 160 health or whatever, that's 2 shots. They have 170 health, all of a sudden it's 3, and that's like a major, major difference.
Exactly. Exactly correct. A new card for Mythical Island set, the face of the set, Mew EX. He is a Psychic type Pokemon. Size Shot for 1 Psychic Energy does 20. Genome Hacking takes 1 attack from your opponent's active Pokemon and just does it. It has 130 HP as a basic and a retreat cost of 1 colorless.
Interesting. This one. All right, so can do 20 damage pretty easily, but 20 is not a lot of damage, but let's see. Or can choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon attacks and use it as this attack. Now, that's interesting, because on one hand, I feel like there's going to be a lot of situations where that doesn't do very much. Like,
famously Pikachu EX, because you never have benched electric Pokemon. It is bad.
Right. It would do nothing against Pikachu EX, but if you have Mew out there and you have Mew out there and your opponent has, I guess, what, like Mewtwo?
Yeah.
Mewtwo had like 150 health and did 150
150.
Damage, right?
Yeah, Charizard is 200, 180. Yeah.
They can't place that out there because you would just mow it down immediately with its own ability. This is interesting. Okay. I'm gonna wager a guess that this card is. Oh, it does cost. You do have to put 3 into it to use that, but maybe that's. I don't know. Huh. This is really interesting. I could. Yeah. So I can see a world where this is good because you put it out there. It's always a risk for your opponent to, like, your opponent can't put their big thing out there.
Well,
depending on what it is.
I think there's like a specific dynamic here that I want to explain.
Okay.
Which is like, if you pass the turn to them and they put their big guy in there, they'll attack before you do.
Oh,
so
okay.
The thing you're talking about requires this guy to sit on the bench and wait for that big guy to come in.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes, I misunderstood how that worked. I thought if you put something, so if you can move something into the front and attack with it immediately.
Yes.
The attack is just the last thing that happens.
The attack is just the last thing that happens. So, like, you're describing a real dynamic with what Mew EX can do. It's just you're describing it in a sort of backwards way. He's the guy that sits on the bench
and
waiting
then
for
comes
that.
in.
Yes.
I see. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. This seems like I'm gonna guess that this card is good. This seems like a hate card almost. Like it I feel like this card probably does nothing against a lot of strategies and is really, really good against other strategies, and it's kind of like an all or nothing type card.
That's yeah, like I think this card is just kind of busted, frankly. I think it is the most important card in the current metagame because it does do that, but it also like randomly is just an amazing tank, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm 130 HP, one retreat cost. Just
Yeah.
it's just like you don't have to invest anything into this guy to use him as a tank. But then also he has this weird thing where it's like if your opponent is playing what I would like to refer to as like symmetrical hitters, guys whose attacks can deal with them, a lot of that gets fully countered by Mew EX. This is one of the main reasons why Charizard doesn't show up as much, is because you spend all this time building up a Charizard. If they get the 3 energy on the Mew EX and you ever send in that Charizard and kill something, they send in the Mew EX and kill the Charizard. Every single time. This is also like one of the main counterplays to Mewtwo at 150, 150. Like this is a big deal in terms of those breakpoints. It really does matter. And it is the thing that has come the closest to dealing with Mewtwo as a main deck. Now Mewtwo also runs this card, but like it is also a card that it definitely does not want to see.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This card seems pretty cool in comparison to some of the other cards we've seen.
I think it's the coolest card in the game, personally. In terms of just like the weirdness of it and the roles that it serves, there has never, I can't think of an analog to what this card is, where it is combination good utility player and hate card. Those cards are not usually mixed. It's not usually the same thing. And this is the only time I can remember really seeing it in like, it's like, I don't know, Thragtusk?
Yeah.
Like, it's a bit like that, where it's just like, if you're playing a certain type of deck and you see this, you're just like, oh my god. And then the rest of the time, it's like, it's still playing a role.
Yeah.
Gyarados EX. Stage 1 evolution evolves from Magikarp, the famously weak Pokemon, into Gyarados, the famously strong one. This is a staple of all of the games that I play. Like, whenever I play Pokemon, like the video game, I always end up with a Gyarados on my team because it evolves at level 20 to Magikarp. It's just like so sick. But Magikarp is totally useless, but they added like an XP share. I'm rambling. Anyway, 180 HP, does 140 damage with 4 energy.
And it discards a random energy from among the energy attached to all Pokemon. Both yours and your opponents. Okay.
It is the thing is, like, it's not that bad for you. Because, like, let's say you're attacking with a Gyarados, you discard one of your own energy. It's fine. You just put another one on, right? Like, you'll still be able to use that 4 again. If you get rid of one of your opponents, that's extra value.
Okay. I mean, my gut intuition is that this card is not good because it costs so much energy to use its ability. But it does do quite a bit of damage, and it does actually have a lot of HP. But I don't. I guess maybe I should say it. I don't know. Maybe this card is actually. I don't know. It's difficult. I think for me, a lot of it comes down because this has to evolve from Magikarp.
Correct.
So I don't know what Magikarp does. So
it sucks.
I
It's
guess
super ass. You basically never want to actually have a Magikarp. You want to have a Gyarados.
I see. Okay. So Gyarados is effectively a 2-card combo to produce this card.
Yeah.
You have to have a Magikarp, and then you have to play Gyarados on top of it. So it's going to take you 2 turns. Yeah, I mean, I'll guess that this card isn't that good. Just because I feel like the card itself is probably pretty good. I mean, 180 HP is a lot, and 140 damage is a lot. But maybe the opportunity cost of how much of having to play 2 cards to put this together, and also maybe it's just not doing quite enough for what you've invested into it. I don't know. That's my guess.
I feel like I was trying to clue you in with the ones we talked about previously to why this would be a good card. And I feel like
Okay.
halfway through the sentence, you were about to say it. You were about to like have that breakthrough. You remember how we talked about like the big guys that died to Mew?
Yeah.
This guy does not, and he eats it. That is basically like, this card is really good specifically because a buttload of HP, Mew does not beat him, and you are able to immediately chomp down on that guy and beat it. You are almost always running Gyarados with ways of adding 10 to 20 damage to him. So
Okay.
you're going to be able to hit those 150 breakpoints thanks to Pokemon like Greninja, which has an ability that does 20 damage, or thanks to a trainer like Giovanni, which adds 10 damage to the attack. Or, we talked about it earlier, Druddigon doing 20 damage to whatever ends up hitting it. That can also matter and allow Gyarados to get to the breakpoints that it needs to get to. But it gets to those breakpoints without dying to Mew, which means that it is the closest facsimile to Mewtwo EX. Yes, it is a stage 1. Yes, that is bad, but that's what it's trying to do. It's going to get to the same breakpoints, but it's not going to get countered the same way.
Gotcha.
This is Sabrina, a supporter card that switches out your opponent's active Pokemon with a bench Pokemon. Remember, only one supporter per turn.
That's interesting. And they get to make this selection, I assume.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, I see that. Yeah. Opponent chooses the new active Pokemon. I feel like this. I feel like this card can be. There's probably a lot of situations where this card's really good. Like your opponent has that annoying tank out there in the front line. They're trying to build something up. You swap, and they have to put like something they don't want to put out into the front line. And you can blow that up.
Exactly. Yeah, that is a role that she plays.
However, I don't know how many supporter type cards people are playing in their decks. This looks worse to me than that the guy that draws 2 cards.
Yeah, it's worse than Pot of Greed.
Yeah. Worse than a free 2 cards. Oh man. Yeah, I'm gonna guess that this card is too situational to be like something that a lot of decks will want to play. But maybe there's a couple of decks that need this kind of a card to like make them work better. Maybe decks that are maybe struggle to get through some tanks, but can build up. I don't know later on. I'm gonna guess that this card is sees like marginal amount of play.
Nah, she rips. This card's insane. So I'll try to do my best way of explaining this, but a lot of why this card is insane is because it's like your opponent is making very intentional choices about what Pokemon they want out there. So like you're correct about the tank application here. Like your opponent has a Druddigon and a Magikarp. They're going to evolve the Magikarp into Gyarados. Use Sabrina, you get the Magikarp out there, you kill it. That's really, really good, right? Like that's a lot of what she does. But it's also like, okay, your opponent has 2 big EX Pokemon. You kill one of those big EX Pokemon, but you can't get through the second one. But they have something else on their bench that you can bring out, and that's your third prize. And so there's also like, oh, your opponent is building up a Pokemon in the active spot, but the thing on their bench has a high retreat cost. So you just yeet that thing back to their bench. They send out something that they can't get out of the active spot, and that energy they've been building up like a tempo swing, so you're able to take more time and build up your stuff to combat it. So it can be good in a lot of different situations. Sabrina's actually like a very versatile card, and she tends to be in basically every deck in the game. There are some exceptions. I think one of the things that the Mythical Island expansion has brought is that there are more decks running more Pokemon now, interestingly enough. Like, the Gyarados deck is not just Magikarp and Gyarados, it's also the full Greninja evolution line, which is 6 cards. It is the full, or it also runs Druddigon. So you see a lot more like 14 Pokemon, 6 trainers type decks, or 12 Pokemon, 6 trainers, I should say. That seems 12 Pokemon, 8 trainers. And in those spots, she's a lot less common. But in like a Pikachu EX deck, they're running this card. In Mewtwo EX, they're running this card. In Charizard EX, they're running this card. In a lot of decks, she's gonna show up. Unless the deck is doing something so hyper specialized that it doesn't have room for her, she's kind of in everything.
Okay. How many, like, I guess that's a question, is like your average deck,
Yeah.
how many like how many Pokemon to other cards are there? Like, you're saying that every deck plays two
Big range. It's a big range.
Okay. Okay.
There are decks that run literally just 2 of a basic EX and then 18 other cards. And so they always start with the basic EX and they're just like, carry me, basic EX. There are decks that run, I think typically the fewest is like, you'll have 12 to 14 Pokemon and 6 to 8 trainers. It's usually 12 to 8 is the fewest that I tend to see, where it's like the Gyarados EX deck is the Greninja as a stage 2 evolution, so you have 2 copies of each of that. You have Gyarados and Magikarp, which is up to 10 Pokemon, and then Druddigon brings you up to 12 Pokemon. And then there's 8 trainers. 8 trainers, I think, is typically the fewest I've seen. Or I should say, yeah, 8 items and supporters, to clarify. Total.
Okay.
Misty, choose one of your water Pokemon and flip a coin until you get tails. For each tails, attach a water energy to that Pokemon.
Alright, so choose one of your water Pokemon and flip a coin until you get to tails. For each heads, take a... Okay. So the first thing I think of was that card you... Isn't Gyarados a water guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this... If you're lucky, this will... put some extra energy on Gyarados and get him out there earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say that this... I guess maybe... I don't know. And flip a coin until you get tails. Okay, so this could just do absolutely nothing if you just immediately flip the tails.
Yes, there is a 50% chance this card does absolutely nothing. I believe someone mathed out the average outcome, which is totally irrelevant because it includes like a bunch of like, 4, 5, 6 outcomes. That's like, there's no functional difference between any of those, but it averages out to like 0.875 energy on average when you play this card.
Okay.
But I think that ends up like, it looks artificially high because again, it's including those like the chance of getting 6. And it's like, there's absolutely no difference between 6 and 10 heads and like 4.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's interesting, man. I don't know. I don't know how to me, the power of this card, based on what I've seen so far, is how valuable are the other trainer cards you could put in your deck? Because this card looks like it obviously has some value in that, like, if you hit on your Gyarados or whatever, and all of a sudden you have this monster on, like, very early in the game that could just straight win you the game, but the opportunity cost is that you can't play other supporters that turn. And some of the other supporters that I've seen, I guess I've seen 2 other ones. One that draws 2 cards, which seems great, and then one that switches, which you've told me is...
I think you could reasonably say that you've seen the 2 best, if that helps you contextualize this at all.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna take a guess. I'm gonna guess that this card, even though it might do nothing, is good because even though like it takes one of your supporter plays for turn, I feel like that other supporter that switches Pokemon out is not something that you have to play every single turn. Like, you're waiting for some turn where you want to play that. The guy that draws 2 cards, you probably want to play that as soon as you draw it, but that might be the first turn of the game before you even care about playing Misty. So I'm going to guess that the upside of Misty, of getting an extra energy, which seems very powerful, there's going to be some turn in the game where you don't care about playing a supporter card. So you could play your Misty, and if you happen to spike on it, like, that might just give you enough of a giant advantage that wins you the game. So I'm going to guess that it's even though, like, sometimes it does nothing, it's good for that reason.
If I had an editor who was worth a damn, you'd hear the sound of a home run crack right there. Yeah, that's exactly correct. You even nailed the dynamics. Like, yeah, you are going to be doing a lot of Professor Oak on the first turn of the game and not a lot of supporters later. Like, that is actually a thing that happens. Sabrina is sort of like a thing that you want to do specifically on certain turns, right? Like, and so you are going to have turns where it's just like, I'm going to play this card and I'm going to coin flip the entire game. If I win this coin flip, I win the game. Is a lot of what Misty's text is basically like that. Because, like, we talked about how valuable energy can be in the context of going first, going second, right? And why going second is so much more valuable is because of that energy. If you get 2 heads on a Misty, I would say your win rate is probably like 85%. Like, it is just like the EV on this is just like you're 50% to just have a massive advantage, and the more heads you get, the more it's just like the game ends. It's over. Like, having that level of ramp is so monstrous, because we talked about how much of this stuff is about breakpoints, right? And about getting up to a certain level of damage. Getting to that level of damage earlier means your opponent isn't at that level of damage. If you Gyarados 2 turns early, they're not going to be able to do anything about that. They're just going to get 140 the rest of the game. It's just going to happen, right? The game, it just ends. It just ends immediately because you chomp through whatever it is they have. And that is what Misty does.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, everyone hates this card, like, so much. Everyone
I can see why.
Everyone despises it. It's just like, bing! That's the sound of the coin flips in the game, and it's just like, do I lose immediately? Like, am I immediately dead?
I mean, on one hand, it seems really unfun to play against this card, but on the other hand, it also seems extremely unfun to play with this card. So,
all of my favorite decks, this is my confession, I absolutely love playing this card. I love it because it's like, a lot of the time it's like, you know, I never don't have outs. You know, I could always just Misty this game away. It doesn't matter.
I can see that being fun sometimes, maybe a little frustrating some other times.
Everyone hates her so much. I'm the only person who likes her. She also has, like, I would argue, like, this card and Moltres have, like, probably the most deleterious effects on, like, what they're allowed to do in their colors. Because if you make anything, like, there are colors that don't have ramp like this, right? If you make a card like Venusaur in a color with access to this, it's a huge problem. But that's because grass doesn't have ramp, it's whatever, right? But this, if you had that, it would be like, oh my god, they immediately set up an unkillable monster. All right, well, I guess I lose. Like, there's just kind of a lot of that, where it's like those cards are very specifically restricting what they're allowed to give those colors if they want to keep the game not screwed.
Sounds like there might be, like, a point much later in the game where they have to get rid of some of these cards to make.
I mean, if you listen
to let the color breathe,
you listen to the Twitter community, like, that point is
you already
passed.
That's fair.
Giovanni. During this turn, attacks used by your Pokemon do 10 extra damage.
Well, I feel like I've been spoiled a little bit in that.
I mean, I did tell you this card existed and that sometimes people played it.
Yes, you did tell me that.
People play a lot of stuff, Brian.
Yes, I believe that. All right. During this turn, attacks by use by Pokemon do plus 10 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Yeah, I mean, this seems very niche. Like what you were saying about breakpoints. Like, this seems like a card where if your Pokemon needs to hit a breakpoint, maybe you have to play this card. If your Pokemon does damage in intervals where the breakpoint doesn't matter, maybe, like for example, maybe Pikachu does damage in chunks of 90. I don't know, like, if nobody's playing many cards that have 190 plus, I think Venus, like that Venusaur card was
Yeah.
190 or something. But if people aren't playing cards that have 190, that have more than 180, like, you probably wouldn't need to have this card. Although, I don't know, maybe your opponent has something that has 100, and then it's good again.
Yeah, like
So
Dredagon, for example.
right. So this card seems very niche to me, and I feel like you're either a deck where you play this card because it lets your Pokemon do the right amount of damage, or your Pokemon already do the right amount of damage and you have no use for this card at all. So I'm gonna guess that it's in like some decks where like they have to play it to like make the deck work. But a lot of other decks don't care about it at all.
Yeah, he's the breakpoint man. Like that's what he cares about. That's his thing. And yes, there are decks where it's like this guy is so crucial to matchup X or whatever, right? Like we can't win the matchup without him. There's definitely decks where he's that. But I think yeah, a lot of the time he's like generally applicable, but it's also like yikes, I really don't know what we're supposed to do with this guy in certain decks that already do hit those breakpoints. Like Charizard, for example, hits every breakpoint ever. It has no need for this card whatsoever. Nothing lives through it anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Speaking of breakpoint stuff, we got Potion here. Heal 20 damage from one of your Pokemon.
Heal 20 damage from one of your Pokemon. I'm gonna guess, even though we've done all this breakpoint stuff, I'm gonna guess that this card sucks because I feel like a lot of the Pokemon I've seen so far are designed to just one-shot something, or yeah, like a lot of the Pokemon are designed to do 150 damage or 140 damage or whatever it is, just some big number that just one-shots the opponent's Pokemon. It just doesn't seem to me like, from what I've seen, there's a lot of like dinking and dunking, chip damage type stuff where this card would be good. So I'm gonna guess this card is bad because it just doesn't match with like how damage is dealt in the game.
I think you're correct in the macro, but a little bit off in the micro, which is to say, the card is better than you think it is. But you are
Okay.
correct about the game dynamic not necessarily being what it wants to be for a card like this, right? Like, if
Yeah.
you're getting one shot, this card is not as useful. It tends to be useful in games where the chip damage does matter, where things are getting chipped down, and sometimes that does matter. And I think we're definitely in a metagame where that matters a little bit more than previously because of what I like to refer to as the Mew EX effect, where like all of these big beefy dudes kind of just get got. So Mewtwo EX gets got by Mew, Charizard EX gets got by Mew. Those were like the big one-shot guys before Mew EX came out. And so now we're doing like Gyarados EX stuff, right? Who hits for less and actually does use chip damage to get to those breakpoints where it needs to get to, right? And so Potion is a little more relevant. And I think that generally speaking, a lot of what's good about this metagame actually can be attributed to Mew EX personally. Like, I think a lot of the diversity that we see is because that card is holding back the one-shot wonder guys.
Yeah, that it's like the for lack of like it's like the counterspell of the format in some regards.
Yeah, it's just like I don't think he gets enough appreciation where it's just like that is what this that the role he has is, again, it's such an incredibly unique role. Like it's I've never seen a card with that role before where it's like this specific thing that allows for like a space between just going over the top and just going super low, because he's good against things that go super low because he's a really good tank, and then he's good against things that go over the top because he can blow them up. But then everything in that middle space he sucks against. And it's just a really weird, it's a really weird shape for a card to have. It's just like it's very odd.
Yeah, I mean the Thragtusk analogy was apt. Thragtusk was really good against low decks and control decks, but sucked against mid range. So it's kind of
it's just such a very odd shape for a card to have. Like that's not a very common thing. Typically, like if a card is good against low decks and good against tall decks, it's also going to be good against mid-range decks because typically you're talking about a card that's just busted. Like that's
Yeah,
typically what we're
yeah.
talking about. But this guy, he's not. He's just weird and shaped oddly. It's a very fascinating design thing to me. All right, so that concludes the guessing game portion of this, but I kind of wanted to ask you, like, what your impression of this game was, because I felt like over the course of that hour or so, you kind of got to a point of understanding about what the metagame was, why it was shaped that way, and I kind of wanted to know if you'd ever encountered similar stuff in your time as a professional card game player. Like things that were like this. What game have you played that is most like this? Is there a Magic the Gathering metagame that you would analogize this to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I feel like it kind of to me has some like analogies to like maybe like some early Hearthstone stuff, but also some of the early Hearthstone stuff was like super combo-rific, so maybe that's not quite right either.
It is a little bit like
Um,
Innervate Yeti. Like, I can see the comp between like Innervate Yeti and Mewtwo EX, where it's just like,
I'm
here's
not
my
I'm not
big
familiar with that.
Chillwind Yeti. You used to like
Oh, yes,
you'd
yes,
play
yes.
Innervate and you'd play a Chillwind Yeti 2 turns early, and
Yes.
it'd be like just this big guy that did big guy stuff, and I could see that for Mewtwo EX actually. Like, yeah, it's like it's a little bit like that. Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, and the like Pikachu deck that you were describing reminds me of that like the Warlock Zoo deck or whatever it was
Yes, it
called.
definitely is. It is definitely
Where it's
Zoolock. Yeah.
yeah, you do a lot of damage, but you also have a lot of like annoying tricky stuff too. So
Yes.
yeah, there might be some analogies to some of that stuff, but
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, did you have any thoughts on like the mechanics of the game? The sort of verticality aspect, the way in which evolution works. It seemed like you pretty quickly grasped that it's like basic Pokemon are super busted. Good thing to grasp, right? What
yeah.
do you think it would take for stage 2 evolutions to be really good? They're okay. I don't want to say that they're bad, but they're definitely like the fact that they are stage 2 evolutions does count against them, and you were correct in noticing that.
Yeah, that's also an interesting question. I feel like that's always a difficult thing in these kinds of games because it's always like anytime you have to invest so many cards into one basket,
Mm-hmm.
like generally speaking in card games that's pretty bad to do unless that basket just wins you the game on the spot. Uh like in Magic for example, like a two-card combo that wins the game on the spot, very good. A two-card combo that like just does stuff, maybe not necessarily so good. So yeah, that is a tough question. Like I feel like the general answer is that like you just have to make those cards so obscenely powerful to make the investment worth it. But then that can create like unfun gameplay in a different regard where you're just waiting on this ticking time bomb that once your opponent assembles that you can't win the game anymore. So yeah, I'm not. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what the answer is for that kind of a question because I'm sure there are creative ways to go about that. Um, like the Gyarados actually looked like a pretty decent example of that, but that was just a stage one. So
Yeah.
yeah, honestly, I'm not sure. Like that's a very difficult design question to have to solve.
All right. On that note, thank you so much for showing up on this channel, BBD. It has been an absolute pleasure as always. Do you have any parting thoughts on the game, on how you think you did, on things you regret, on things you wish I explained better? Anything goes. This is your section.
Well, I'll say this much. I think I was right more often here than I was when we did some of the same thing with Marvel Snap where
Sure.
I
Yeah.
was wrong like 97% of the time. So, I feel a little bit better about this one in terms of my own accuracy.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's all I got.
A
I don't
thumbs up
know.
for yourself.
That's right.
Some
I'm gonna
self
pat
congrat.
myself on the I got nothing else going on right now. I got to pat myself on the back when I have the
Yeah.
opportunities.
Hell
So
yeah, brother.